It's odd. The number of asylum hotels has gone down from 400 to 200. The government does seem to be doing as much as it can in many ways. It's already returned 35,000. It's got a whole lot of new policies. It's got returns agreements. It's trying to get through the backlog left by the Conservatives. And yet this is the summer when there are so many protests against the asylum hotels. Why is that? Why do you think it is? Is it because you've just had enough? You've been putting up with it for too long and now is the time when enough is enough? Or is it because there are politicians such as Robert Jenrick or Nigel Farage who talk about that and not much else, and this is their big issue, and they come up with kind of what seem to be fairly simple solutions to it? Is it because the media are not talking about anything else? And listen, I'm as guilty as anyone else. I've put it in my first hour of time on LBC. But I'd like to know what it is that people think, because it is something that we are all discussing. I mean, the things that the government has done, they've had a massive raid in Belgium where they've picked up a huge shipment of small boats. They've stopped 12,000 crossings by working with the French. They've got this returns pilot with the French. They've got this borders bill where they're going to introduce counter-terrorism powers for small gangs. They've got a sanctions regime against smugglers. They're going to look again at the ECHR and work with Europe on potentially amending it. They've got international intelligence agreements with India, with Bulgaria, with Romania. They've got a joint action plan with Vietnam. I mean, it's boring. There's lots of detail, but they are trying. So, I mean, is it because it isn't exciting enough? Is it because the government's not explaining well enough what it is that they're doing? Or is it that they're missing the obvious and there is something else that should be done?
I think the issues that we're seeing at the moment in terms of people, protesting outside asylum hotels, I think it's being lost in why I think it's happening, and I'll explain why. So I think at the moment, the UK is obviously facing a lot of problems in a lot of different areas. The NHS is something that is struggling. It's under-resourced, it's understaffed, as we can see by things like ongoing industrial action as well, by doctors and nurses, young people struggling to get on the property ladder because of, extortionately high mortgage interest rates. And, even people that are graduating from university struggling to get into work. So I think people are just a little bit, disenfranchised by all of the issues. And I think this is probably a distraction from why this might be happening. Because generally, I think there's not a country in the world that is more accepting of people from different backgrounds than is the UK. The UK is an amazing country. It's very, very, tolerant towards people from all different backgrounds. And I can say that really proudly. My parents have brought me up here. I was born in the UK, but we are of Indian origin. And, we've never faced any level of discrimination or anything of that sort. And I think the race riots that happened last summer, they're not really reflective at all because, in every society, you'll get certain individuals that are just doing these, atrocious things. And I don't think that is a fair reflection of how, amazing the UK is towards people of all different backgrounds.
I agree with you. And I'm really proud of our country because it is so mixed. And it makes us a better country, because we have lots of different people and and the mixing, is in itself creative and makes us, pushes us and our economy does better and we learn from each other and we have much better creative industries and the stimulation of having people from all sorts of backgrounds is definitely a positive. And I'm proud to represent a constituency where, we have dozens and dozens of languages spoken in my constituency, people from all over the world living in Islington, all on top of each other, and we get on. And we're an example to the world. But look, we mustn't be complacent about it. There is clearly tension at the moment as a result of what's going on. And I hear what you say, that for many people it's a distraction and it's because they feel disempowered. But what do we do about it? I mean, what should the government be doing?
I think the government needs to look to address some of the issues that exist at the moment. So, for example, the NHS is a big talking point when we come to any conversation around, net migration, because obviously it's a resource that is available to people that's in the UK. So I think the government needs to look into addressing those issues because, things like industrial action, etc., those things are going to continue to go on until the government actually look and think, we've got a little bit of a problem here. How can we look to make those changes?
So you mean that when there's a time of scarce resources, particularly public services, the idea of more people coming into the country and maybe competing for those public services is something which worries people? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so even in my profession, so I'm actually a doctor, for resident doctors, it's extremely difficult because you are struggling to get into sort of postgraduate training programs, the number of GP training programs, core psychiatry training programs, areas where we really, really do need doctors and specialists, they're sort of capped.
It's mad, isn't it? It's completely mad. I know we have shortages, and yet we can't train enough doctors, even though there are people wanting to do it, to fill the very vacancies that we have. I mean, I know that Wes Streeting's aware of this, and we just have to do something about it. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you've got really talented, able people that want to do these positions, but, the number of places just hasn't kept up with the number of doctors that, want to do those jobs. But that really just comes down to the government not really looking at the fact that, okay, we need to do something. Maybe we do need to increase the number of training places. Maybe we do need to expand the budget when it comes to the NHS. I know that obviously these things can't happen overnight, but I think if the public are able to see meaningful progress or ideas brought to the table, then they might start to have a little bit more belief and confidence.
I think the other thing as well is that I think we need to say more often, Karan, that if it wasn't for migrants and their children, the NHS would have fallen over a long time ago, because the number of people who work in it, from migrant backgrounds.
Yeah, I think, the UK obviously has long relied on people from all different backgrounds. And I think it's, as you said, something that should be celebrated. Diversity in any workplace is always a good thing. I think really people are just very, concerned with some of the issues that exist, the cost of living, young people even struggling to get on the property ladder at the moment. And, when you work hard, and you're not able to sort of achieve or meet those basic things that you think to yourself, by now I should probably be a homeowner, or, I should be able to get a doctor's appointment. That's when people then start to get a little bit concerned, and then, the conversation sort of starts to steer in other areas, such as migration.
Yeah. All right, look, thank you ever so much for ringing, and thank you for your thoughtful contribution, Karan. And good luck. I hope you get your training contract.
The problem is the nation has been radicalised for years, absolutely years. There's no way that you'd speak to what people who consider themselves as not racist and not right-wing, but use loaded, weaponised language like undocumented, fighting age, illegal, that kind of stuff. And the reason I phoned in is the day after the general election, having been up for God knows how long. I was getting up to 40 hours by the time I phoned in, and I was very otherworldly. But James said, why isn't everybody celebrating? And I told him then, the reason I'm not celebrating is Labour could have got in with anything in the last general election. You could have said anything and you'd have got in. And you didn't make the case for immigration. And I think, so whereas I don't blame you for the radicalisation, I blame you for not starting the process of de-radicalising people. Well, some of us do. I mean, as I say, I'm proud to represent the constituency that I represent, and we wouldn't be who we are without migration in Islington and in London. And London does very well economically, and one of the reasons for that is because we've got people from all backgrounds and people with ambition who work hard and who are tolerant and get on with each other and learn from each other. I mean, this is the essence of a successful society. So why aren't you doing things like saying, because you're in power now, why are you doing things like saying, well, why don't we totally take the business model out of the people traffickers by making safe and legal routes? for asylum seekers, because that would immediately take the bottom. There would be no need for small boats. So rather than try and be harsh on smash the small boats, you could actually just remove the business model by making safer legal routes.
So I think this, Jane. I think you have to have a migration system that works, and that has to be one which is fair and fast and firm. When you say no, you mean no, but you have to have a system that works so that people can get into the country in a fair way. And also decisions need to be made quickly, one way or the other. But I think that what's been agreed with France, this one in, one out that everyone has been so critical of, is actually the beginnings of what you're saying when it comes to, getting yourself some proper routes into the country. So, the new deal with France is we're going to send back people who are taking the mickey. And in exchange, we will take people who already have some roots in this country, who might have, an auntie who's already here from Syria, or, whatever it is, and who's able to claim asylum and a place that way, so that we can bring people in who we really ought to be. And it is the best place for them to be, is to come over to the UK, rejoin their family and claim asylum in the UK. So there are, the beginnings of legal routes for some countries. We do have some, obviously. We've got safe and legal routes for people from Ukraine and Hong Kong. But I hear what you're saying, that, if you're from Sudan, how do you get to the UK in a legal way? At the moment, there isn't a legal route.
Precisely. So you're pushing at an open door here. I agree with you, but it's still the language. The language is all we're being tough on. We're being tough on these people. You still, as a government, using the word illegal when actually it's technically irregular. People arriving here.
No, I understand you, but I think also you need to be able to be heard by the public. So you have to meet people halfway. And you have to be able to say, we will be tough. I mean, if someone is coming here taking advantage of a system that we have, where we want to be able to give asylum to those who are suffering, within their home countries, who are fleeing from war and torture, and we appreciate that we have an obligation to give them somewhere safe. And there are those who take the mickey and who claim that that's what they are, but they're not. And they're undermining our system. We have to be tough on them because otherwise the whole system collapses. You need to have a system that people believe in, which means you do need to be tough on those who, as I say, just take the mick.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're pushing us an open door here. I agree completely. I mean, in the past, you could have wandered into, if you were in Sudan or Eritrea, you could have wandered into, if you could have got into a British embassy, claimed asylum, be processed overseas, and then bring your family over safely and legally, rather than have to, send your youngest man who's capable of clinging to the bottom of a truck through Syria on a boat across the channel, hope he can get in, hope he can claim asylum, then hope he can reunite his family. It's just so wrong. And we need to start de-radicalising people. I phoned James.
I hear you, Jane.
I phoned James probably about 3 weeks ago. I've got a asylum hotel. I've just worked it out, 246 metres from my house. That I've spent. Well, we've actually stopped. We had to count it. I mean, I've had death threats. It's not been nice. And
why have you had death threats?
Because I stood in front of a bunch of screaming right-wingers.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah.
And suggested they might like to be quiet. Sorry, I'm tearing up slightly.
No, I understand.
And we stopped doing a counter demonstration because it was just irritating the locals and scaring the people inside.
Well,
but we've got to do something. So and James said, "What are you going to do?" And at the time, I didn't know. But what we have actually done, we had a meeting last Thursday. We had about 30 local people, all the local faith groups, local business, and we formed something called Hoylake for All. That's where I'm from. Right. And we're starting to do the process of just like trying to build some unity in what's left of the community.
Well, you say what's left. Hang on, Jane. Don't say things like that. It's not right. What's left of the community. I mean, there is. It's going through a period of stress. It sounds like, but I don't believe that your community is dead. I don't believe that for a minute.
I think the riots and the protests that have gone on since Labour got into office are twofold. Partly because Nigel Farage is very good at speaking to people of that mindset, but also Keir Starmer is terrible at it. And he's made a lot of mistakes since getting in, and Labour generally, and I'm going to be perfectly frank with what I'm going to say, because I think mistakes have been made. When you say about, for example, use of hotels are going down, but as somebody else on message has pointed out, people arriving illegally is going up exponentially, it feels like. So if you're not putting them in hotels, but they're still coming to the UK, where are you going to put them? You're still going to have that problem, and it might be HMOs, it might be private housing. That doesn't solve the problem.
I think the decisions, I think there's a backlog as well. So I think that the government's working really hard at trying to clear the backlog where there were, honestly, there were literally, I had it myself. I had people come to my surgeries and just saying, I want to have a decision made. They're not making a decision. And the last government just stopped making asylum decisions. And that was part of the problem. So that was also part. So there's lots of things that the government needs to do. They need to clear the backlog. They need to make sure that the decisions are made faster. They need to enforce those decisions so that if people are not allowed to be here, they need to be returned, and that needs to be. They need to work on that, and they need to also try to discourage people from trying to come over to this country to claim asylum if they really aren't asylum seekers. As I say, like I was saying about the campaign that they're having in Vietnam to try to make sure that the Vietnamese understand that they're not going to be able to come and start a new life in the UK, which will be anything other than exploitation and misery.
I just think you're missing the point there. I don't think whether they're in Vietnam or they're in Syria or in Afghanistan, I'm sure that they're aware of people's sort of reluctance to welcome them to this country, but they'll come anyway unless there is a severe deterrent that is shown that can work. And whatever you want to say about the previous government, there was a lot of prime ministers, but the last one at least was trying to implement something that would be a deterrent, whether it was being challenged in courts or not. The point is, the people are coming here. They know if there's no deterrent, they'll try their luck.
But hang on. Let's look at what happened. They introduced the Illegal Migration Act, right? And they said anybody coming into the UK on a small boat is going to be an illegal, and they won't be allowed to have asylum, and we won't even discuss their case. And they built up 26,000 people because people didn't stop coming; they kept coming, and they couldn't send them all to Rwanda, even if Rwanda had been decided to be legal. There wasn't enough space in Rwanda for them to be able to send all. Their policy was never big enough to be able to send everyone to Rwanda. That was never going to work. So they just didn't have policies that were fit for purpose, and they knew it. And what gets my goat is hearing, being lectured by the likes of Robert Jenrick, who was one of the guys who negotiated the hotel contracts in the first place, telling the current government that they're doing it all wrong.
I think the principle of Rwanda would have been a deterrent. So the idea is that some people would be sent, and therefore that has a knock-on effect on the model where people start worrying about whether they would get sent to Rwanda or not. And there was a notable drop in arrivals when Rwanda was first being implemented, if you remember. But when it started getting challenged in courts and flights start getting stopped, that's when the numbers started going back up again.
I think we might be rewriting history a bit. Let me just ask you this, though. Are you buying what Farage is selling? What do you think about what he says? Because he's saying kind of the same sort of thing. He's saying, he's going to deport everybody, that if anybody comes over in a small boat, that's it. They're all being sent back, including women and children. Do you think that's a good starting point?
Well, absolutely not. But the problem is it's seductive language now because, look, if you look at the optics, and rightly or wrongly, in this country now, this has become a real issue for a lot of people in the UK because they're seeing a lot of single men hanging around hotels, usually from Africa or the Middle East, not generally other areas, with no kids or women around them, often because those are men-only hotels, and that's just a cultural thing of those people who come here. They can't be in a hotel with women and children.
Whoa, hang on, what? What? Well, these are single men who can't be trusted with women and children.
Why do they have hotels only for men?
I think it's probably because there's more men coming over on their own than women and children. I think that's a fact.
And that's I'm glad you mentioned that because I mentioned the researcher that there was a Labour MP that suggested the opposite once on television. And again, that's another matter that people look at and suggest that why are Labour not telling us the facts when there actually are a huge amount of single men coming over from those areas, from countries that culturally have issues, have wars as well, and it will make them more difficult to integrate into this country for those backgrounds.
Well, we have always offered sanctuary to people who've come from war zones and people who have been the victims of torture. And of course, it's difficult for them because they've come halfway across the world and they come with the trauma that they've suffered. But what are you to do? We're human beings. They're human beings. We have a duty to help, don't we?
Absolutely, we do. I mean, and like I say, I come from a background of immigrants that arrived in this country from from the Commonwealth. So there may be some connection with Commonwealth countries that have similarities with Britain.
Yes.
However, the Fine family and others that came followed a legal process, and it feels you feel cheated when people jump the queue. In many ways, when they are not necessarily, coming legitimately through, an asylum reason.
Yeah, no, well, I think that's fair enough. I mean, I can't, absolutely, and it's well put, that point, Rajdev. And I think that's the point about having an immigration and asylum system that works. People have to have confidence in it. They have to know that if you are given asylum in this country, it is because you have suffered, because you have come from a war zone, because you have been raped, because you have been tortured. You need to have sanctuary, and we're offering sanctuary. And that's why it's really important that we process people quickly, that we're firm about decisions that we make, and that we return people. And that is what the government needs to be doing. But they are doing it from a standing start, Rajdev. I mean, that's the point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the system inherited was bad.
Yeah.
And I will say that towards the end of the Tory government, they were trying to make moves to getting things right, but it was probably too little, too late by that stage. And now Labour have got a lot on their hands, not just with this, but with the economy, with taxation. What are the right choices to make? What are the wrong choices?
And I think people looking around the other British citizens, if they see people of different colour or whatever who kind of clearly come from a background where there has been migration in the family, everyone needs to be confident that people are here legally and they're here for the right reasons. And if you have an asylum system or an immigration system that breaks down, then it isn't just the recent migrants who are affected, it's also people who have been here for many generations, because it'll simply feed prejudice against them. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. As somebody from that background, I agree. But I've never experienced that level. There's always been racism in this country, but it feels like this is another level of racism that's being created because people will be suspicious of whether you came here legally or not, or whether you gamed the system.
No, I understand. I understand what you're saying, and the worry is real.